Hi, everybody. Nice to see you here. Welcome to my channel. My name is Margaret Pennard. I'm an eclectic reader and a historical fiction and fantasy author. And today I've got a standalone book review because I had one book that didn't quite make it in last week's Wednesday wrap up. And I finished it right after I did that live stream, and it was so good. I'm giving it its own live stream because there's a lot to say about it. Also, I have a book box set out. So if you haven't heard and you haven't heard me rattling on about it, it's an ebook bundle. It's my 1820s family saga, and it's out as a box set. So I'll pop that in the chat in case you're not aware. I write books and they're available for purchase. It's good fall reading right there. So let me pop up my banner. Hello. Yes, this is a really good book. There's a lot to talk about in it, so I'm glad that I'm giving it a lot of space. It's The Sign for Home by Blair Fell, and I'll pop this up so we can have a reference point as we go through all my various points. If you maybe were on MJ's live yesterday and heard me talking about vertical format videos, between yesterday and today, did not feel prepared enough to run that live stream, so that will be in the next couple weeks. But this standalone book review is what I have for you today. So welcome, welcome. I am, let's see, going to say the chat that was yesterday. So MJ with the channel This Reading Life did me a solid and shouted me out this morning. So thank you so much. If any of you are here from her channel, hi. I read a lot. Last week's Wednesday wrap up had 6 books in it. I read widely, eclectic reader. Historical fiction is my favorite. That's what I write. But I also read a lot of nonfiction, a lot of romance, and a lot of readathon books that like sort of fit into those categories. So that's what you can expect here. And if that sounds up your alley, go ahead and subscribe now. All right, so this audiobook that I listened to. So I'm popping the cover on the screen in the audiobook format, which is a square, just to remind people that that's how I listened to it. And I'll try to do a bit of a review of both the book itself and the audiobook format. Just a reminder, I get my books from libro.FM because they're my most amazing, most wonderful smelling audiobook purveyor in the world. So there we go. Thank you to libro.fm for being the indie supplier of choice of audiobooks. That's amazing. So The Sign for Home is the name of the book. The author's name is Blair Fell. He's also an actor, so he narrates his own book. And sometimes this can be not great, but in this case, it was excellent. I think it really added to the book. Here's his biography. Blair Fell lives in Jackson Heights. That's New York City for all you folks who don't have family that came from there, with his partner. Blair's television work includes Queer as Folk, which I barely remember. He's a few years older than I am. And the Emmy award-winning California Connected, which I don't know about, but I should. He's written dozens of plays, and his personal essays have appeared in HuffPost, Out, and Daily News New York, and more. As well as being a writer, Blair has been an ASL interpreter for the deaf since 1993 and has also worked as an actor, producer, and director. So pretty fab. And it's pretty important to note that he's had both completely separate job tracks in his life, because The Sign for Home, it means a lot of things, but primarily it is the story of Arlo Dilly, who is a deaf-blind consumer, as the interpreter would call him, as a client, I would say, outside, and Cyril Brewster, I think his last name is, the interpreter who is the person advocating for the consumer throughout the book and this journey to self-realization. And this is going to be a spoiler-free, except for a very small section at the end, book review. So don't worry, I'll put up a banner if I say anything that spoils anything. And just to let you know, I would say don't bother reading the blurb because it has sort of a spoiler in there for something that you would expect. And I would say just pick it up and read it or listen to it because it's rolled out very well and you don't need like the extra thing to keep you guessing. There's also on Blair Fell's website a video of him speaking and signing as he speaks his inspiration for the book, which is he being around these communities, I think mostly deaf, and then he explores a little bit more the deaf blind community for this book. Being around those people and experiencing their questions and curiosities and listening to their thoughts made him very curious about what they would be attracted to in a person. Because if you can't see and you can't hear, hearing and sighted folks like me and like Blair would be like, well, what is left to create that spark that you would fall in love with someone for? And so that's what he sort of fell into writing this book about, which is pretty cool backstory. And then here come my like disclaimers, caveats. I'm learning, you're learning, we're all learning. Caveats at the beginning. So first, I want to acknowledge the strange case of the hearing person, that's me, listening to a story about the deaf and deafblind communities. So there, it's sort of odd that it's available in the audiobook format because it's about the deaf communities. But what Blair Fell points out in his video is that he wanted to take these stories and bring them to people who did not have any into that world because they're fascinating, interesting, worthy of representation to others. And so I thought that was really great, but it does make it a little strange that I'm listening to it. So just get that out of the way. Second, I want to acknowledge that while I don't have a lot of information about these communities, this book, The Sign for Home, was a rich source of variety and detail, but by no means representative of all experience. So it's my responsibility to search out more of these voices before I declare myself an expert on the topic, which I will never do. But I will use the terms that Blair Fell uses in the book, believing that those are the ones most accepted by the majority of those communities. So there's a lot that I learned, and I'm going to use it in describing the book and describing why I liked it and appreciated this approach so much. And then finally, same for queer communities. This book is an Own Voices queer representation book. It's got all the things. As you heard in his bio, Blair Fell lives with his partner in Jackson Heights, and his character in the book is a middle-aged gay man, which I think allowed him to put a lot of his own understandings and misunderstandings into that character's experience in a true way. So we've got someone who is part of one marginalized community representing that community, but also sort of putting a side spike into the well of another community that he's interacted with a lot. So I thought that was very interesting. And to me, he's done a lot of research to the deafblind community to portray them in a caring and multifaceted way. So, but that's my opinion, and I'd love to hear others. So there we go. All right, so now we can dive into the book. And I just want to say, I forgot this banner. Oh, no, I didn't, but I'll just put it up again. We love libro.FM. Oh, and I could say hello to the chat that came in. So we had RC Scott, hello, hello. SD Houston, hello, hello. Anita Stewart, hi, hi, hi. Felicia, dreamingtruth.author. And Tiffany saying hi. Yay. So we got a bunch of authors in the chat. Amazing. Authors gotta read too. Okay, so diving into the book details, and this is no spoiler section, so you're safe. I found this book to be funny as heck. So a lot of times I will find my humor and my need to laugh in the books of a romance because they can play a lot with humor and wit, and it's very enjoyable. This book, I would say, is more literary fiction, but it is chock full of humor. The voices of both of the characters have their own very unique types of humor. And then there's just like the plot that happens that is sometimes played in a humorous way. And so like that was very enjoyable. Funny book. And it's hard to find those sometimes. So funny as heck is my pronouncement. Second, there are two POVs, which I already sort of stated. They're very differentiated and recognizable in the narration. So you've got the interpreter, Cyril, who talks in the first person, and you've got the consumer, Arlo, who actually talks in second person. Right? Very cool. And he does this in a way that makes it very, like I said, differentiated and unique, and also appealing to someone who is in their head a lot. So it just seemed to fit very naturally, and I thought that was a great choice. Okay, next detail. The education was so smooth. So I read a lot of nonfiction books, and sometimes in nonfiction books, which are meant to educate people on certain topics, you get preachiness, you get like long, dry facts, you get this sort of thing, and it sort of turns you off to the topic. But in this fiction book that is representing communities that people like me do not know a lot about, I found it to be very accessible, so smooth. So we learn about what a good interpreter should do, because what do I know about like the ethics of interpreting? But it is made very clear it's very important to Cyril that he should sign everything everyone is saying, and that Arlo's not used to this. So like we get a feeling of, oh, okay, Arlo maybe not getting the representation he needs, and Cyril is like trying to get it for him, but not step over the line and get himself in trouble. So that was very clear. We learn about the gossip in the deaf community, because several characters talk about how gossipy they are, and the resentment of having to be nice because you're dependent. So we get that early on from Arlo, how he sometimes hates people because he always has to be nice, because he never knows when he'll have to depend on the kindness of strangers, to use the Tennessee Williams language. So I could see definite parallels to other communities in that statement. So that really rang true. But it was, again, very natural, sort of a way to educate people about the difficulties that we have no idea about, in a very natural way. So we get that when Arlo is talking to himself in his head. We also learn about the ADA, not something that I ever thought I would want to sit down and read, and the struggle for more accessibility through a conference that Cyril attends, and he gets all excited about these new ideas. And it's just made so central and natural to the plot that, again, education is seamless. And I just really applaud how this was woven in. Trying to take notes on this one as an author myself. I would also say, in the like character realm, there's very real secondary characters. So not only are we focusing on the journeys of Arlo and Cyril, but the secondary characters that Blair Fell paints and portrays are very real, like warts and all. So we've got, I just called out a few. We've got Molly, the old interpreter who is a Jehovah's Witness, as is Arlo. We've got Lavinia, the Caribbean diaspora writing adjunct who teaches the class that Arlo joins. And we've got Hannah, the Dutch transplant best friend of Cyril, who then meets Arlo and gets sort of twined into this magical journey. And I just felt like none of them were there simply for one plot twist, and none of them were there simply to show one side of a main character. I thought they all had their own struggles and talked about them on the page so that they were accessible to the reader. I just thought they were very well done. Yeah. And usually there's something that just doesn't fit, and you're like, oh, I wish they would have explored that more. But I really, really liked the secondary characters. And there's even more. There's Arlo's friends that he doesn't get to see for a long time, and all this stuff. So it's really great. I would say all of the characters, with the exception of one or two, are very sympathetic. And just minor like inside joke here, the struggle as Hannah's friend seems very real from Cyril's side. If you have a friend who's crazy and goes off the handle, and you love them, but like can't be held responsible for them. That seemed like very real, relatable. One of the format choices for this book as an audiobook and as a reading on the page book was to signpost, I guess I would call it, ASL signs. So maybe 5 or 6 times, maybe more, they would mention a sign and then describe it, like how the hands would move. And I just thought that was really interesting because you're trying to translate something into the language. So this is version, this in the French term, to make it more accessible for the reader, which also just sort of like makes you more aware that it's a completely different language, which is something that's made clear when Arlo is trying to write English in the class for an essay. And Cyril says something like ASL is actually closer to Chinese in construction, so it's very hard to think about verb tenses and prepositions. It's a different language. It's not just a representative sign, if that makes sense. So yeah, that was just like kind of like having an illustration to make you connect things in the text. I thought that was really nicely done. In Arlo's POV, there's like the repetition of sniff because he depends on smells to recognize people or places, and sort of record his environment and his experiences. I thought that was really powerful. Like it's just a verbal cue for, wait, you're not taking notice of something, and like you have to check yourself basically. So very effective. And then the structure. So in the structure part of this book, I would say it's very it reveals layers like you're peeling an onion. So that's why I say don't read the blurb, because like it isn't obvious until the end that the thing is going to happen that's mentioned in the first sentence. So I thought that was really well done in terms of the inciting incident. Arlo needs to go to this class and he needs an interpreter. And the interpreter who is signed up with him makes things happen by being around him. And then you move into knowing more about the characters, getting to know the secondary characters, getting to know the backstory that is sort of unraveled a bit at a time because Cyril wants to know. So that's the sort of shoulder we're peeking over. And I thought that was very natural as well. I said it's a well choreographed heightening of risks and rewards. All right. And then the final little point here is that there's a whole religious fundamentalism side plot. And I'm here for it. I definitely appreciated it. I was telling someone yesterday that I don't know much about Jehovah's Witnesses. I've never talked to one, had one knock on my door, had them at any event. But for the last year, at least, I have noticed hordes, and they're in pairs, and they're in opposite corners, and they're in population centers. So they're out there for the intent of converting people to their religion on the streets and sidewalks with umbrellas in the hot weather, no matter what. And this book also educated me on Jehovah's Witness stuff. Like that is called field service and some of their beliefs and whatnot. But in this case, there is a gamut of experience between people who Cyril knows, who are fine to, have a life, be kind to people, and be Jehovah's Witnesses, as well as people that interpret the actions of their God as license to manipulate other people's lives. And so that was a really powerful theme in this book in terms of access, in terms of rights, in terms of letting your potential come to the fore, no matter what your situation is. So yeah, so that was really great. And then I'll just pop this up, my little tiny spoiler section. It won't be long, don't worry. It gets a bit less believable at the end because there's like a madcap crew sailing in to save the day, and it's kind of like done in a Greek drama fashion where everything is in one day and they go here and they go there and everyone's together and like I don't know, they're like a crew even though they've just joined forces and they're sort of uneasy allies. But I did really want the resolution that happened, so I'm okay with it. And well done for all that action. Oh my God, Grand Central Station. If you know, you know. So that's all I'll say on that. Okay, spoilers over. And I have one more section, but I'll stop in with the chat. I have extensive notes, but I want to stop in with the chat to make sure I don't miss all your comments. Oh boy, we got second POV. Shannon says, the fact that the cover has the words "a novel" was the biggest clue that this was literary fiction. Yes. But it's super funny and like actiony too. So don't, throw the towel in early. This is why I'm giving it 5 stars. And Rachel Morley is here. Hello. Hope you're having a delightful day as well. Rachel is afraid of the second POV. Don't be. It comes very natural. Shannon says, I feel that is a weird thing. If he hates people because he feels he has to be nice because he might be dependent on them, I kind of understand it. But why not just be nice because 1, everyone deserves kindness, and or 2, be the example, and or 3, just to be a good human being. So I don't know how to feel about that. Okay, so here's my response is that you're in his head at the very like first level of feeling. So there's no filter. It's not like he just goes around hating people. It's just that it flares. And because he is so in his head, because he is so isolated in his religious fundamentalist upbringing and unable to contact friends or talk to anybody except at church, and no one there really signs worth a dang. He's just talking to himself. So it's a lot of like emotional management, and he's acknowledging things and then going, okay, this is what we have to do. And so it comes across as really realistic to me and very understandable. So I thought that was a good thing to understand about the character of the dependency. So my thoughts. Yes. There's more to a person's overall makeup that it's more than just the physical aspect of a person. Shannon says, I may also be seeing this through my lens, that I would never allow myself to feel like I'm dependent on anyone, even if I had physical limitations, which I've had throughout my life, medical stuff. Yes. Paul is here. Paul Marron, hello, hello. And Barrett saying, hi, friends. Welcome. Lurking while driving home. Barrett and Tiffany and Morgan were so nice as to make room for me and my live stream today. They will be having a writer's room, I think, in 30 minutes or maybe an hour and 30 minutes, depending on the time zone. And yeah, I switched the topic. So I still got in the time zone, though, or time slot. Yeah. Ebook bundle. Yay. He's just a grumpy old man. No, he's 23. He is young and has been separated and isolated and like really needs a friend. So this is why he feels like he's been let down by the world, because he really has. And being deafblind means he depends on some interesting people for his any activity. And I loved the scene in the cafeteria. I won't spoil it, but I loved the scene in the cafeteria. All right. Writer's room is in 30 minutes. Awesome. A young, grumpy old man. I wouldn't say he's grumpy. Yeah. You'll just have to read the book, guys. It's so good. So I have links if you want to get the paperback from Bookshop, and I have links if you want to go to Libro and join libro.fm to get the audiobook, because again, thought it was really good. If you don't do audiobooks, yeah, that's a thing. Okay, so final section was that I was thinking about other influences. So reading about a community whose experiences I don't share, and just acknowledging that, okay, not everyone in that community is going to be like this, but it is a really great window to open up my understanding. It made me think about Booktube And we've got a few friends who are low vision and blind content creators on the AuthorTube side as well as the Booktube side. So I will post their links in here. If I can do this without all the parentheses that I put in for myself. So Jordan always stops by and says hello. Jordan from The Blind World. And he's over in Ireland and always curious and great at leaving comments. Lauren Adele, whose channel is now The Writing Sisters. I think Lauren and Nicole sort of swapped and both do both, but Lauren's is The Writing Sisters. Nicole, the Blind Mage, is The Blind Sisters now, so pop hers in. And I have questions for you guys if you're curious. So I'll tag you in the description and see if you want to answer. And then finally, we've got Mason in the Dark, who's another fabulous writer and booktuber who occasionally we get to hear from over here. But what I was thinking about is accommodation, or if that's a loaded word, accessibility in terms of Booktube. I wonder what you guys would think of someone writing a story like this. So to me, it's good. It would be good to have more people know about some of the experiences in communities that share attributes of mine, even though they're not exactly the same. I think on some level, there's always a bit of like more acknowledgement, more compassion, more, oh, okay, so I need to pay more attention to XYZ when we hear about these people's experiences. And do you have recommendations of work by other writers who really nail the struggles of your disability community or struggles that you identify with? So recently I had an author-tuber book swap with Mariah Enkenman. She is a contemporary romance writer, and I read her book Perfect Imperfections, where she gave her main character OCD, and she has OCD. And so she was like really bringing to the fore some of the things she wished people would know and not make the mistake of believing, that sort of thing, while also making it clear that disability is not a plot device. And so, it's still there at the end. And even if you find love, it's still there, and that's okay. Like normalizing it, seeing representation is important, and it's not like a Cinderella tale where there's magic and it goes away, because for people it doesn't. So that's one I thought of in terms of disability communities. But if you guys have recommendations for other writers who really do a great job at cluing in us hearing and sighted folks, please let me know. Leave a comment, and if you can't leave a link because of the security thing, leave the title and the author's name, and I would love to follow it up and post links. So, yeah, open my eyes to something new. Yeah. So that is the standalone book review for today. Thanks for anyone joining after the fact. I normally go on Wednesdays and Sundays with my Booktube opinions in hand to give you my latest recommendations, and first Fridays and final Fridays for productivity sprints. So those are coming up, and I'd love to see you there. If this is your type of content, subscribe down below, and you'll see me again soon. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Happy reading, and take care.